The morning coffee shop routine had become her shield against the world. Elena sat in the same corner booth every day at exactly 8:30 a.m., her laptop open, fingers moving across the keyboard with mechanical precision. The words she typed were boring technical manuals about software nobody really cared about, but boring was safe. Boring didn't hurt. 3 years ago, she would have laughed at the person she'd become. Back then, she was the woman who helped broken people put themselves back together through art. Her therapy sessions were filled with laughter, tears, and beautiful messy paintings that told stories of healing. She believed in love and second chances and the power of human connection. Now she wrote instruction manuals for computer programs. The coffee shop buzzed with morning energy around her. Young couples shared pastries and whispered sweet things to each other. Business people rushed in and out, phones pressed to their ears, talking about meetings and deadlines. College students hunched over textbooks, highlighting passages with bright yellow markers. Elena watched them all from behind her laptop screen, like looking at fish in an aquarium. They seemed so alive, so full of feeling. She wondered when she had stopped being like them. When had she become this hollow version of herself? Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Want to grab dinner tonight? Found this cute new place. Downtown, Elena stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, can't tonight. Big deadline. It was a lie. She had finished her work yesterday. But the thought of sitting across from someone who knew the old her, who might ask questions about her life, felt exhausting. She closed the text without waiting for a reply and went back to typing about software updates and system requirements. The words blurred together on the screen. She blinked hard and reached for her coffee cup, but her hand was shaking slightly. When had that started? Across the street, she could see into the windows of a small bookstore. A man was arranging books in the front display, moving slowly and carefully like he was placing precious things. He looked to be around her age, with gentle hands and the kind of face that suggested he smiled easily, though she never saw him smile. Every day she watched him through the window. He seemed as careful and quiet as she was. Sometimes she caught him looking back toward the coffee shop, and she wondered if he was watching the busy life inside the same way. She watched the world around her. The bookstore owner intrigued her in a way that made her uncomfortable. She had trained herself not to be curious about people anymore. Curiosity led to connection, and connection led to pain. She had learned that lesson the hard way when her husband decided their 10-year marriage wasn't enough anymore, when her best friend decided loyalty wasn't important anymore, when everyone she trusted decided she wasn't worth protecting anymore. The betrayal hadn't just broken her heart, it had shattered her ability to trust her own judgment. If she couldn't see the lies from the people closest to her, how could she trust herself to read anyone correctly? So she had stopped trying. She went to work, came to the coffee shop, went home to her small apartment, watched old movies, and went to sleep, day after day. Week after week, month after month, it was a life without surprises, without disappointment, without heartbreak. It was also a life without joy. But she had accepted that as a necessary trade-off. The morning crowd was thinning out when she noticed the bookstore owner heading toward the coffee shop entrance. Her stomach did a little flip, and she immediately focused harder on her laptop screen. She heard the door chime, heard his voice ordering something at the counter, heard his footsteps moving through the shop. She kept her eyes down, but she could sense him getting closer to her table. Her heart started beating faster, which annoyed her. She had worked hard to train her heart not to react to anything anymore. Then it happened. A soft bump against her table, and suddenly her coffee was spreading across her papers and dripping onto the floor. Oh no, I'm so sorry. His voice was warm and genuinely distressed. I'm such a clumsy person. Please, let me help clean this up. Elena looked up into concerned brown eyes and felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. A tiny crack in the ice around her heart. It was just for a moment, just a flicker. But it scared her more than the spilled coffee. It's fine, she said quickly, grabbing napkins and trying to save her laptop from the spreading liquid. Really? It's nothing. but he was already helping, carefully moving her computer to safety and soaking up the coffee with more napkins. His movements were gentle and efficient, like someone used to taking care of things. "I work at the bookstore across the street," he said as they cleaned. "I see you here every day. You're always so focused on your work." "I'm David, by the way, Elena," she replied before she could stop herself. When their hands accidentally touched while reaching for the same napkin, she felt that crack in her heart widen just a little more. She pulled her hand away quickly. "Thank you for helping," she said, already packing up her things. "But I should go. I have things to do." David stepped back, giving her space. "Of course. I'm really sorry about the coffee. Can I at least buy you a replacement?" "No need," Elena said, closing her laptop with shaking hands. "It happens." She hurried out of the coffee shop without looking back, her heart pounding like she had just escaped from something dangerous. In her car, she sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. For 3 years, she had felt nothing at all. And in one 5-minute conversation with a stranger, she had felt more than she had in months. It terrified her. The smart thing would be to find a new coffee shop, to avoid the bookstore owner with the kind eyes and gentle hands, to keep herself safe in her carefully constructed world of not hang. But as she drove home, she found herself already planning to return tomorrow morning. Same time, same table. Maybe she would even smile if he looked her way. The thought scared her, but for the first time in years, scared didn't feel completely terrible. Elena kept her promise to herself. The next morning, she walked into the coffee shop at exactly 8:30 a.m., her laptop bag slung over her shoulder like armor. Her heart was beating faster than usual, and she told herself it was just the extra cup of coffee she'd had at home. She ordered her usual drink and sat in her corner booth. But this time she couldn't help glancing toward the bookstore across the street. David was there, arranging new books in the window display. When he looked up and saw her, he raised his hand in a small wave. Elena felt her cheeks warm and quickly looked down at her laptop screen. When her coffee arrived, she noticed something different. Instead of just her name written on the cup, there was a small note underneath. "Hope your day is filled with good words, both the ones you write and the ones you read." Elena stared at the message for a long moment. It was such a simple thing. But when was the last time anyone had wished her a good day? When was the last time anyone had even noticed what she did for work? She found herself reading the note 3 more times before she started typing. The next day, there was another note. "The trees outside are changing colors. Sometimes the most beautiful things happen slowly, one day at a time." Elena looked out the window and realized she hadn't really noticed the autumn leaves before. Red and gold painted the street outside, and for a moment, she felt something that might have been appreciation for beauty. It was a strange feeling after so long. By the 4th day, she was looking forward to the messages. They were never pushy or romantic. David never asked her to meet him or suggested they talk more. He just left these small gifts of words that made her feel like someone saw her as more than just another customer. One morning, the note said, "Art is not what you see, but what you make others see." Edgar Degas. Elena's breath caught in her throat. How could he know she used to paint? She looked across the street and saw David watching her through the bookstore window. This time, she didn't look away immediately. That afternoon, she found herself walking past the bookstore on her way to lunch. Through the window, she could see it was filled with comfortable reading chairs and warm lighting. Books were arranged, not just by category, but in small displays with handwritten signs that said things like "Books for Rainy Days" and "Stories that Heal Hearts." David was helping an elderly woman find a book, his face patient and kind as she described what she was looking for. Elena watched him pull 3 different books from the shelves, explaining why each one might be perfect for her. The woman left with a smile and a bag full of books. Elena was so focused on watching him that she didn't notice when he looked up and saw her standing outside. Their eyes met through the glass, and this time, Elena didn't run away. David smiled and gestured toward the door, a question in his eyes. Elena's first instinct was to shake her head and hurry away. But something in his expression stopped her. He looked as careful and uncertain as she felt. Like he was hoping but not expecting. Like he understood that some people needed extra time to trust. She pushed open the bookstore door and stepped inside. The shop smelled like old paper and fresh coffee, and soft music played in the background. It felt like a safe place, a place where broken things could rest. "I saw you reading outside sometimes," David said quietly, not moving toward her. "I thought you might like to see the art section. We have some books on painting techniques. If you're interested." Elena's throat felt tight. "I used to paint," she said, the words coming out rougher than she intended. "A long time ago." "What kind of painting?" David asked, leading her toward a corner filled with art books. "People," Elena said, then stopped. She hadn't talked about her art in 3 years. "I used to help people tell their stories through art." "Art therapy." David nodded like this made perfect sense. "That sounds like beautiful work." "Hard work, but beautiful." "It was," Elena said, "until I stopped being good at reading people." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Elena felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Why was she telling this stranger her business? But David just nodded again. "I used to work with kids in the hospital," he said quietly. "I loved helping them feel better, until I stopped being able to handle watching them hurt." Elena looked at him with new understanding. They were both people who had cared too much and paid the price for it. "Is that why you opened a bookstore?" she asked. "Books felt safer than people for a while," David admitted. "They still break your heart sometimes, but they don't betray you." Elena almost smiled. "They don't leave you for your best friend either." The words hung in the air between them. Elena couldn't believe she had said that out loud. She hadn't told anyone about her divorce, not really. Not the details that made her stomach hurt and her hands shake. "I'm sorry," David said. And his voice was so gentle that Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. "That must have hurt in ways that are hard to describe." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. When was the last time someone had acknowledged her pain instead of trying to fix it, or telling her to get over it? They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by stories of other people's lives and adventures. "The notes on my coffee cup," Elena said finally. "They're nice. They make my mornings feel less empty." David suggested when she couldn't find the word. "Yeah, empty." David pulled a book from the shelf and handed it to her. It was a collection of paintings by artists who had overcome difficult times in their lives. "You can borrow this if you want. No pressure. Just thought you might like to see what other people created when they were finding their way." Back Elena held the book carefully, like it was made of glass. "Thank you." She left the bookstore that day with the book under her arm, and something that felt dangerously close to hope in her chest. That night, she sat on her couch and looked through the paintings. Each one told a story of struggle and healing, of colors, returning to a world that had gone gray for the first time in 3 years. Elena thought about buying art supplies. The next morning, she walked into the coffee shop with the book in her bag. When her coffee came, there was no note on the cup. Instead, there was a question. "How did you like the paintings?" Elena looked across the street to where David was watching her from his bookstore window. She took out a pen and wrote on a napkin. "They reminded me that I used to see in colors." She held the napkin up to the window, and even from that distance, she could see David's smile. The storm hit on a Tuesday evening in November. Elena had been browsing the art section of David's bookstore, something that had become a weekly habit over the past month. She wasn't ready to buy paint yet, but she liked looking at the books about color theory and brushwork techniques. It made her feel connected to a part of herself she thought was gone forever. She had been there for almost an hour, sitting in one of the comfortable reading chairs with a book about watercolor landscapes. When the light suddenly went out, "Well, that's not good." David's voice came from somewhere near the front counter. Elena could hear him moving around in the darkness, and then the warm glow of candles began to fill the space. "Sorry about this," he said, placing candles on tables throughout the store. "The whole block seems to be out. The storm must have knocked down some power lines." Elena looked toward the windows and saw that the street was completely dark, Even the traffic lights were out. Rain pounded against the glass so hard it sounded like tiny stones being thrown. "I should probably go home," she said. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't a good idea. The storm was getting worse by the minute, and walking to her car. "And this weather would be dangerous. You could wait it out here if you want," David offered quietly. "I've got plenty of candles, and the couch in the back is comfortable. No pressure, though. I can help you get to your car if you really want to leave." Elena looked out at the storm again. Tree branches were bending in ways that looked frightening, and she could barely see across the street through the rain. The coffee shop where she spent every morning was just a dark shadow. "Maybe I'll stay for a little while," she said, "just until the rain calms down." David brought her a cup of tea from a thermos he kept in the back office, and they sat in the candlelit bookstore listening to the storm rage outside. The flickering light made everything feel different, more intimate but also more honest somehow. "This is nice," Elena said, surprising herself. "I haven't sat in candlelight in years. I forgot how peaceful it feels." "I love storms like this," David said, "as long as everyone's safe. There's something magical about the whole world going quiet except for the wind and rain." They talked about small things at first. David told her about funny customers who came into the bookstore looking for books they could only remember one detail about. Ellen shared stories about her technical writing work and how strange it was to write instructions for programs she never used. But as the storm continued and the candles burned lower, their conversation grew deeper. "Can I ask you something?" David said after a long, comfortable silence. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," Elena nodded, though her heart started beating faster. "That first day when I spilled your coffee, you looked like you were going to run away. And sometimes when I see you in here, you get this expression like you're fighting with yourself about something. I was wondering what made you so careful about people." Elena was quiet for so long that David started to apologize. "I'm sorry. That was too personal. I shouldn't have. No, it's okay," Elena interrupted. "I just don't talk about it much, or ever, really." She took a deep breath and looked at the candle flame dancing on the table between them. 3 years ago, I found out my husband was having an affair with my best friend. They had been seeing each other for almost a year before I figured it out. Everyone in my life knew except me. David didn't say anything, just listened. The worst part wasn't even the cheating," Elena continued, her voice getting quieter. "It was realizing that I had completely lost the ability to read people. I'm supposed to be good at understanding human behavior. That was my job. But I couldn't see what was happening in my own life." She paused, remembering those terrible months of discovering lie after lie after the divorce. "I stopped painting. I stopped doing therapy work. I stopped trusting my judgment about anything important. Because if I could be that wrong about the people closest to me, how could I trust myself about anything?" The candle flickered, casting moving shadows on David's face. Elena could see compassion there, but no pity. That made it easier to keep talking. "I became this person who doesn't feel anything," she said. "Because feeling nothing is better than feeling stupid and betrayed and completely lost." David was quiet for a moment, then he spoke softly. "I stopped working with kids because I couldn't handle losing them anymore. Every time a child didn't get better, every time I had to watch parents say goodbye to their baby, it felt like a piece of my heart was being torn out." Elena looked at him in the candlelight, seeing the pain in his eyes. "The last little girl I took care of was only 6 years old. She loved to draw pictures of butterflies. She gave me one of her drawings the day before she died, and I completely fell apart. I couldn't go back after that. I felt like caring that much was going to kill me." They sat in silence, both lost in their own memories of pain and loss. "So we're both people who loved too much and got hurt," Elena said finally. "And now we're both afraid to love at all," David replied. Elena felt tears starting to build behind her eyes. She hadn't cried in front of another person in 3 years. She had trained herself not to show that kind of weakness, but sitting in the warm candlelight with someone who understood what it felt like to have your heart broken by caring too much, she felt the walls she had built starting to crumble. "I don't know how to feel anymore," she whispered, and then the tears came. I don't know if I even remember what love feels like. I'm so tired of being empty. But I'm terrified of being hurt again. The words poured out of her like water through a broken dam. Love me again, human. Make me feel again, human, she said. Her words soft yet powerful, speaking to David, but also to the universe, to life itself, to the part of herself that had been sleeping for so long. David didn't try to fix her tears or tell her everything would be okay. He just reached across the small space between them and took her hand, holding it gently while she cried. I'm scared too, he said quietly. Scared of caring about someone again. Scared of losing someone again. But sitting here with you, I'm starting to think maybe being scared together is better than being safe and alone outside. The storm was beginning to calm, but inside the candlelit bookstore, something new and fragile was beginning to grow between two people who had forgotten how to hope. The morning after the storm, Elena woke up feeling different, not better exactly, but more awake than she had in years. The conversation with David in the candlelit bookstore had cracked something open inside her, and she wasn't sure if she should be grateful or terrified. She found herself standing in the art supply store downtown, staring at tubes of paint like they were dangerous weapons. Her hand shook as she picked up a small tube of blue. It was just paint, but it felt like she was holding a piece of her old life. Can I help you find anything? The store clerk asked. I used to paint, Elena said quietly. I'm thinking about starting again. What kind of painting did you do? Elena paused. Portraits mostly. I help people tell their stories through art. The clerk smiled. That sounds beautiful. Are you looking to get back into portraits? Elena looked at the wall of colors surrounding her. I think I just want to see if I remember how colors work together. She left the store with a small bag containing basic supplies. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just enough to see if her hands remembered what her heart had forgotten. That afternoon, she set up her new easel by the window in her apartment. For an hour, she just stared at the blank canvas. The white space seemed to mock her, reminding her of all the beautiful things she used to create when she believed in beauty. Finally, she dipped her brush in blue paint and made a single stroke across the canvas. It was shaky and uncertain, but it was something. Color on white, a beginning. Over the next few weeks, Elena found herself painting in the evenings after work. She didn't paint anything specific at first, just colors and shapes that felt right. Sometimes the paintings were dark and stormy, full of grays and blacks that matched how she had felt for 3 years. Other times, tiny bits of yellow would sneak in, like sunshine trying to break through clouds. David noticed the paint under her fingernails when she came into the bookstore. You're painting again, he said, and his smile was so warm that Elena felt her cheeks flush. Just a little, she said. Nothing good, just colors mostly. Colors are everything, David said. They're the beginning of everything beautiful. They had started spending more time together, but carefully. David would suggest coffee together after she finished her work at the coffee shop. Elena would invite him to walk through the park when the autumn leaves were particularly beautiful. They moved like two scared animals learning to trust each other, ready to run at the first sign of danger. One evening, David showed up at Elena's apartment with takeout dinner and a nervous expression. I thought maybe we could eat together and you could show me your paintings, he said. Only if you want to. No pressure. Elena's first instinct was to say no. Her apartment was her safe space, and her paintings were too personal to share. But something about the hope in David's eyes made her step back and let him in. They ate Chinese food on her couch while rain tapped gently against the windows. It was different from the storm that had brought them together weeks ago. This rain was soft and peaceful, like the world was being gently washed clean. I'm nervous about showing you the paintings, Elena admitted. Why? Because they're all about pain and fear and trying to feel again. They're not pretty. David set down his takeout container and looked at her seriously. Elena, I work in a bookstore full of stories about pain and fear and people trying to feel again. Some of the most beautiful art in the world comes from the hardest places in human experience. Elena led him to her makeshift art corner, where 5 small canvases sat on a table. The paintings were abstract but emotional. Dark blues and grays dominated most of them, but each one had small touches of brighter colors fighting their way through the darkness. David stood quietly for a long time, studying each painting. "They're incredible," he said finally. "You can see the struggle in them, but you can also see hope trying to break through. They tell a story. The story of trying to wake up from being numb," Elena said. "The story of someone refusing to stay asleep forever," David corrected gently. That night, after David left, Elena started a new painting. This one had more color in it, still some darkness, but also warm oranges and soft pinks, colors that felt like the beginning of hope. But learning to feel again wasn't smooth or easy. There were setbacks that left Elena questioning everything. One morning, David was 20 minutes late to open the bookstore, and Elena immediately assumed the worst. He had changed his mind about her. He had found someone better, someone less broken. Her mind spiraled into all the old fears and insecurities when he finally appeared. Apologizing because his car wouldn't start, Elena was already packing up to leave the coffee shop. "Hey, are you okay?" David asked, catching up with her on the sidewalk. "I'm fine," Elena said, but her voice was shaky and her hands were trembling. "You're not fine. What happened?" "Nothing happened. That's the problem. Nothing happened, and I made up this whole story about why you were late, and how you probably don't want to see me anymore, and how stupid I am for thinking someone could actually care about me." The words poured out before she could stop them. Elena felt embarrassed and angry at herself for falling back into old patterns. David stepped closer, but not too close. He had learned to give her space when she was scared. "Elena, my car broke down. That's all. I was frustrated and worried about disappointing you, but I never once thought about not wanting to see you." "But what if next time it's not just a broken car?" Elena asked. "What if you wake up and realize I'm too much work? What if you decide you don't want to deal with someone who falls apart every time you're late?" David was quiet for a moment, then he spoke carefully. "What if you wake up and decide I'm too much work? What if you get tired of being with someone who's afraid to get too attached to anything because he's terrified of losing it?" Elena looked at him in surprise. She had been so focused on her own fears that she hadn't considered that David might be just as scared as she was. "I guess we're both pretty messed up," she said. "Yeah," David agreed. "But maybe we can be messed up together and help each other figure it out." That afternoon, Elena painted a new canvas. This one showed two figures reaching toward each other, across a space filled with both darkness and light. It wasn't a perfect painting, but it felt true. Learning to trust again meant having conversations about their fears instead of running from them. It meant David admitting when he felt himself pulling away because caring about Elena scared him. It meant Elena sharing her panic attacks instead of hiding them. Slowly, they developed a language for their healing. When Elena felt overwhelmed, she would tell David she needed space, and he would give it to her without taking it personally. When David felt himself shutting down, he would tell Elena he was scared, and she would remind him that scared didn't mean alone. 3 months after the storm that brought them together, Elena's ex-husband called her out of nowhere. "I've been thinking about you," he said. "I made a mistake. We made a mistake. Maybe we could try again." Elena listened to him talk about regret and second chances, and she realized something important. She felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction that he wanted her back. Just a calm, clear knowledge that this part of her life was completely over. "I hope you're happy," she told him. "But I'm building something new now, and it doesn't include you." When she hung up the phone, she felt lighter than she had in years. She called David and told him what had happened. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," Elena said. "For the first time in 3 years, I feel completely free." That night, she painted until dawn. The canvas filled with bright colors and bold strokes. It was a painting about liberation, about choosing to move forward instead of looking back. When David saw it the next day, he said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever created. 6 months later, Elena stood in the community center gallery. Watching people move slowly around the walls lined with her paintings, her hands were shaking. But it was a different kind of shaking than before. This was excitement mixed with nerves. Not fear mixed with emptiness. Local artist returns to her roots read the sign by the entrance. It wasn't a fancy gallery downtown, just a small space in the community center where local artists could show their work. But to Elena, it felt like the most important exhibition in the world. David stood beside her, holding two cups of cheap wine from the refreshment table. He was wearing a nice shirt she had never seen before, and his hair was combed more carefully than usual. He looked as nervous as she felt. "How are you doing?" he asked quietly. Terrified and excited and proud and scared all at the same time, Elena said, "Is that normal? I think that's exactly how you're supposed to feel when you're doing something brave." Elena's paintings covered 3 walls of the small gallery. The exhibition told the story of her journey over the past year, from the dark, stormy canvases she had painted in the beginning to the bright, hopeful pieces she had completed just weeks ago. The centerpiece was a large painting that showed to people reaching toward each other across a bridge made of books and paintbrushes. With light streaming through the darkness around them, she had titled it "Learning to Feel Again." People moved through the gallery slowly, studying each painting with serious attention. Elena watched their faces, trying to read their reactions. Some people nodded thoughtfully. Others stood for long minutes in front of particular pieces, lost in their own thoughts. A young woman about Elena's age stopped in front of the centerpiece painting and stared at it for several minutes. Elena could see tears in her eyes. "Excuse me," the woman said, approaching Elena. "Are you the artist?" Elena nodded, suddenly feeling shy. "I wanted to thank you for these paintings." The woman said, "I've been going through a really hard time lately, a bad breakup, and I've felt so numb for months. But looking at your work, seeing how you painted your way from darkness to light, it gives me hope that I might feel normal again someday." Elena felt her own eyes filling with tears. "You will," she said. "It takes time, and it's scary, but you will." After the woman walked away, Elena turned to David. "I can't believe someone connected with my work like that." "I can," David said. "Your paintings are honest about pain, but they're also honest about hope. People need to see both." As the evening continued, more people approached Elena to talk about her paintings. An elderly man told her that her work reminded him of his late wife's struggle with depression in her journey back to joy. A teenager said the paintings helped her understand what her mother had gone through. After her parents' divorce, Elena realized that she had come full circle. She was helping people again, but this time through her own art instead of guiding others. Through theirs, she was sharing her story of healing, and it was helping other people believe in their own ability to heal. Near the end of the evening, Elena's sister arrived, looking around the gallery with wide eyes. "Elena, these are incredible," she said, giving her a long hug. "I'm so proud of you. I knew you'd find your way back to art eventually." "I didn't think I would," Elena admitted. "For a long time, I thought that part of me was gone forever. The best parts of us are never really gone." Her sister said, "Sometimes they just need time to heal before they can come back." As the gallery emptied out and Elena helped take down her paintings, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not just because people had liked her work, but because she had proven to herself that she could create again, that she could feel deeply again without being destroyed by it. David helped her carry the paintings to her car. "I have something to tell you," he said as they loaded the last canvas into the back seat. Elena's stomach flipped. Even after all these months together, her first instinct was still to expect bad news. "What is it?" David reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elena's breath caught in her throat. "I'm not proposing," David said quickly, seeing her expression. "Not yet, but I wanted you to have this." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring with a small stone that looked like it contained swirls of color. "It's a paint stone," David explained. "The jeweler told me that artists used to wear rings like this to remind them that they carried color with them everywhere they went." Elena stared at the ring, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "David, it's beautiful, but I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not too much, David said gently. You've taught me that caring about someone isn't too much, that feeling deeply isn't too much, that love isn't too much, even when it's scary. He took the ring from the box and held it out to her. This is just a promise that we'll keep choosing to feel, keep choosing to trust, keep choosing each other. Even when it's hard, Eleanor let him slip the ring onto her right hand. It fit perfectly. I love you, she said, the words coming easier than they ever had before. I love you, and I'm not afraid to say it anymore. I love you too, David replied, and I'm not afraid to mean it anymore. 3 months later, Eleanor was back in the community center, but this time she wasn't there for her own art. She and David had started a program called Healing Through Art for people who were struggling with difficult life changes, divorce, job loss, grief, depression. Anyone who felt stuck or numb was welcome. Eleanor stood in front of a group of 12 people, all holding paintbrushes and looking uncertain. I know this feels scary, she said. 6 months ago, I was terrified to put paint on canvas because I had convinced myself I couldn't create anything beautiful anymore. But here's what I learned. You don't have to create something beautiful. You just have to create something true. A woman in the front row raised her hand. What if we don't know what's true for us? Then paint that, Eleanor said with a smile. Paint the not knowing. Paint the confusion. Paint the mess. Sometimes the most honest art comes from the places where we feel most lost. As the group began to paint, Eleanor moved around the room, offering gentle encouragement. She watched people's faces change as they put color on canvas, saw the same transformation she had experienced months ago. The return of feeling, the rediscovery of self, the courage to create something from nothing. David worked with her, reading poetry and stories to the group while they painted, creating a soundtrack of words to accompany their visual creations. At the end of the session, they hung all the paintings on the wall and stood back to look at them together. Every piece was different, but they all had something in common. They were alive, messy and imperfect and real, but undeniably alive. This is what healing looks like, Eleanor told the group. Not perfect, not pretty, but honest and brave and full of feeling. That evening, Eleanor and David walked home together through the downtown streets. Eleanor's paint stone ring caught the streetlights, throwing tiny rainbows onto the sidewalk. Do you ever miss being numb? David asked. Eleanor considered the question seriously. Sometimes, she said. When things are hard or scary, there's still a part of me that wants to shut down and stop feeling. But then I remember that feeling nothing also means missing everything beautiful. And I don't want to miss the beautiful things anymore. They stopped walking and David pulled her into his arms, right there under the streetlights. Thank you, he said. For what? For asking me to love you again. For asking life to make you feel again. For being brave enough to mean it. Eleanor kissed him, tasting hope and possibility and the promise of all the feelings yet to come around them. The city hummed with life, full of other people learning to love and feel and trust again. It wasn't a perfect love story. They still had hard days, still had moments of fear and doubt, but they had learned that love wasn't about being perfect. Love was about showing up, day after day, choosing to feel everything, the scary parts and the beautiful parts, together. As they walked the rest of the way home, Eleanor's mind was already planning her next painting. This one would be about the courage it takes to begin again, about the beauty that can grow from broken places, about two people who learn that the opposite of heartbreak isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of hope.